Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our video today on implementing ROMA. We are going to be featuring a story from a local community action agency. This is part of our ROMA Next Generation video series as a component to the Implementing ROMA curriculum piece. And today we're going to be featuring Economic Security Corporation out of Joplin, Missouri. And they're going to be presenting an example about how they've implemented ROMA in their local community action agency. So our agenda for this short video, it's going to be about 30 minutes long. We're going to give an overview of the ROMA and ROMA Next Generation in the very beginning. Then we're going to talk about the role of the organizational standards in ROMA implementation and how that's really set us up to be able to implement ROMA effectively. Then we're going to go through this case study example from Economic Security Corporation. We're going to be talking about the ROMA audit, logic models, the community needs assessment, and how that ties into the strategic plan as well as the theory of change, as well as local agency scorecards. Then we'll be talking about next steps and how to access additional resources. So this video today is presented by Debbie Markman. She is the Resource Development Director of Economic Security Corporation of the Southwest area out of Joplin, Missouri. We also have on the video today myself, Courtney Kohler. I'm a Senior Associate with the National Community Action Partnership, and Barbara Mooney. She's the Director of the Association of Nationally Certified ROMA Trainers. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Barbara Mooney, and she's going to give us some introductory information.
Good morning. We're so excited to have this case study example for the network of a local agency working on ROMA implementation. Just a reminder that ROMA is not just a report, it's not a program or service, but it's rather a complete management and accountability process. And we're really focused on a results orientation. What results have we achieved from the agency's activities? These are the pieces of the ROMA cycle that we're going to look at: assessment, planning, implementation, reporting on results, evaluation, and analysis of data. We've put some additional arrows in our ROMA cycle graphic. You'll recognize the ROMA cycle around the middle of this, but you've got arrows that are going counterclockwise as well as clockwise, and that are going from implementation to assessment, from achievement of results to assessment, and so on. We wanted to make sure that your understanding about the ROMA cycle is that it is not just a one-way cycle. You don't do assessment and then planning and then you're done with assessment, but that you may come back to each of the pieces of the ROMA cycle throughout your implementation. The organizational standards really help to emphasize the importance of the elements of the ROMA cycle. We know that community action agencies are to be results-oriented, and some of the elements of the cycle are really embedded in the organizational standards. And accountability is an integral part of all of the activities of the local agencies. So we did this little graphic to show the relationship between the organizational standards that have customer input and community engagement and so on, and then the section in the middle where there's the overlap between the standards and the ROMA cycle, and then the ROMA cycle also speaks to the implementation of services and strategies. So the ROMA implementation and the organizational standards are a joint effort to improve the network. So how do we know what we're doing? I'm going to turn the program over to Debbie Markman, and she's going to talk a little bit about her agency's identification of the current situation. Debbie?
Thank you, Barbara. So the most important thing here is, how do you decide in your agency to get started when you may feel like it's a big project. So to make it easier, it's best to start with someone who wants to learn about ROMA. And in our case, our weatherization director was very interested in finding out about how ROMA would work with the weatherization division. So that's one way to do it. Another option is work with folks that are already doing a good portion of ROMA within their departments. So an example would be in our agency, Head Start and Early Head Start, we're doing all of the ROMA cycle elements, and then our Community Development Division was also doing that. So we were able to work with those groups. And this is how we got started, really, with evaluating where our different departments were at. We created this visual because I'm a visual person, and it really helped our staff to see where they were at. As you can see on the outside, the arrows are the ROMA cycle, and on the inside really contain what the different local program is doing to meet those needs in their own department. So we still look at a community needs assessment. That's an agency needs assessment, but when we talk about weatherization, these are the things that they would do for their needs assessment. And so it's important once you can figure out this information that then for us we moved on to another tool that allowed us to really get more in depth about the audit process. And this is what we took. Ansert has a great tool on their website to use, and we did utilize that, and then we added some things that we felt were important, and that was how would we find the documentation. We included organizational standards and Head Start performance standards as well, so we knew that these items were meeting those criteria. We also added 3 columns at the end that really help us identify the need for help, what type of help is going to be needed, and then who is going to be that person to provide that assistance. So you can see we have lots of red areas, and these are going to be areas that for the next 12 months we'll be trying to work on figuring out what is the information that should go in here, and then how should we proceed. And I threw in the very last page of our weatherization audit because this is the evaluation section. And you can see it's a lot of red. Our weatherization has a lot of reports, and it's just unclear at this point what the data they have, how will we evaluate it, what does that look like. And so we have some work to do with our weatherization director and our ROMA staff here.
Thanks, Deb. I think it's useful for the network to see that you're finding places where you can improve. So those areas where you've identified in red are places where you can think about how you're going to improve. And one of the tools to use for laying out the program level activities is the logic model. Would you talk a little bit about how you use logic models at your agency?
Thanks, Barbara. Sure, we will. We in Missouri weren't utilizing logic models for a couple of years, and as a ROMA trainer, I am dependent on that process to get a lot of data that we use in our data collection and evaluation for our annual report. So it was a little unnerving not to have a logic model for the agency or for the different departments. So we figured out that it needed to happen because it was consistent with keeping our mission statement available. Also, we were able to use that logic model agency-wide to talk about the different programs with our board of directors, and then it also meets the organizational standards pieces that you need to be meeting. And the logic model, to me, is the easiest tool. This is a great example that Ansert uses for their family level, and certainly you could utilize that. And then this is what Economic Security Corporation ended up utilizing. And for us, we added a section that included family, community, and agency so we could identify those tools. Our mission is in a column instead of at the bottom. It doesn't really matter. And then the national goal or Head Start benchmarks are listed there as well. We also added a section for MPIs. Again, this just makes it easy for the ROMA trainer, implementer, and agency staff working with this ROMA to know, okay, I don't need to look at a different tool. In the needs assessment, this is the most difficult piece that our staff deal with, and I feel as a ROMA trainer, it's our responsibility to make sure that our staff understand that they need to identify the problem, which should be indicated in your community needs assessment. They should talk about the gap in service if we are approaching it and we already have resources in our community that deal with that. And then again, they've got to dig hard with the need. So the identified problem has to be really identified, which is the hardest thing to do, and then the need. And again, those items should be in your community needs assessment. And then this particular example that we provided is about systematic change, because community work is really difficult sometimes to really identify what system are you trying to change, what's the target ID identification, and then for us, we also have a space farther over that talks about the baseline ID, because we end up doing projects and we often forget to be looking at the baseline ID. And the rest of the information, I think most of you will be familiar. The outcome, what is the general outcome? If you don't want homelessness anymore, then that's what you should be stating there. And then the next pieces are talking about identification of your outcome with numbers, which is critical for you then to be able to get that actual achieved, which is the next column. And then measurement tools. For us, it's important as an agency that we all understand what are the tools that are being utilized to measure this. Otherwise, I have no idea what they're doing, and sometimes they haven't thought about it. So it's a really great opportunity to have conversations with staff working on projects. And then data resources. This is really important to know the data source. If it's a management information system, if it's not working correctly, then that department may have to use other sources. So it's really important. And then how often are you having staff gather the data, and then typically a director is reviewing that data. So it's important to make sure you include everybody that is in that collection process.
Thank you. That really helps us to consider the big picture. Could you drill down a little bit and talk about how the community needs assessment connects with some of the other parts of the ROMA cycle?
Yes, thanks, Barbara. The first item that you cannot kind of set aside is the needs assessment. Often folks put this needs assessment, in a bookshelf, and that's the end of it. We actually utilize that, and then we do updates on an annual basis. They're small updates, but there's often information that you didn't collect, or things change, and it's important. Poverty data right now is changing annually, so that's a real critical piece to make sure that you don't have a county that's dropped below state and national averages, because you may need to marshal your resources in another place. The other thing that's important to remember is what gets measured gets done. So having that needs assessment and your strategic plan and your outcomes are just critical. And this is an example of how we utilize this with our board of directors. So we utilize their needs assessment, and the one thing that I have to say is we have little numbers on there that really are more to help the board know flow, even though we know arrows go all different directions. Staff had actually asked me to put that in there. So, again, you make this how you need it to work for your agency. And then this is an update that we used this year for our 2019 poverty data. This is shared with our Head Start supervisor, area supervisors, the community development staff, weatherization, our leadership team. So again, when we're looking at programs, do they fit? Is there a need based on our needs assessment? And this allows us to keep things as a living, breathing document.
I want to emphasize the one thing that you said is that you should adapt this whole process to meet the needs of your agency, because if you're not meeting your own agency needs, then just going through the process isn't useful. So thanks for talking about that. So you've talked about how you looked at the individual programs, and you looked across the programs with the community, with the needs, and you share that with the board. Can you now talk a little bit about how the whole agency strategic planning and theory of change process is working?
Yes. So we did things a little differently this year, or the last 2 years when we started our strategic planning. It really started from the National Theory of Change. We reported that information as part of our ROMA training with our board of directors. Knowing we were going into strategic planning, we wanted them to see nationally what did that picture look like. And the first words really that came out of several board members' mouths were, "This is great, but what does it look like for Economic Security Corporation?" So that got my wheels turning a little bit about, well, how are we going to take our strategic planning process and really develop a theory of change for Economic Security Corporation that's going to be that one-page visual that staff then and legislators and members of our community will really understand. So we took about 3 or 4 months talking to different organizations about helping to facilitate our strategic plan, which included the theory of change. We were very fortunate that Cap and Courtney Kohler were willing to be our facilitator because they already understood how community action worked and also what needs to be in a strategic plan based on your organizational standards, and then the piece of the puzzle about your theory of change. And so this is what we ended up with during our training, and I have to give credit to Courtney. She did a great job in making sure during the process of our strategic planning that we talked about assumptions, services, and strategies, outcomes as a group, and made sure that all of that information was being able to put into this template. We also changed our mission and vision. And so again, that was a huge step for us. We'd had a mission and a vision that really wasn't necessarily speaking about Economic Security Corporation and the work we were doing. And then we added an area called Broad Agency Goals. This is something our Head Start had adopted, and we wanted to be consistent, again, across the agency. So we made a few minor tweaks on theirs, and now this is very recognizable across the board. And then this is what our version of it looks pretty. We worked with a graphic artist who has been making our agency brand look like across the board in all of our materials, and we were super excited that they were able to make this look very legible. They're on 18 by 24 corrugated cardboard, and we have them in all 31 of our office locations. And I have staff that we've presented this material to, 293 out of our 372 staff in the last 4 to 5 months have received the theory of change training as well as the ROMA cycle for their department's training. And we've really received a lot of positive feedback, and it's great when you go into one of our outreach or Head Start centers and you see the board right in the very front as you walk in. So parents, community members, staff all see this and every day know that our vision is a thriving community of neighbors that is free from poverty.
I see actual board that you're talking about. And it's very useful to be able to see that whole vision laid out and your adaptation of the goals. So we want to close this cycle thinking about how do you collect and monitor your data, how do you use your data to tell your story.
Sure. So one of the things I like to talk about is that we want to focus on results, outcomes, and not service counts. So some of the things we've talked about just recently at another group was they were doing food boxes and counting the number of food boxes that they were handing out. So I asked them, so what difference did the food box make? And I kind of got a blank look and no response. So we talked a little bit in the group about what does that mean? Are there other services that you are bundling with this particular customer? Are you doing follow-up to find out what difference you are making? And I think really what community action is looking at is what is the results. We're results driven. We have a IM 49 that, you know, kind of leads us that direction, and that's where we should be going. But we have to really look closely at service count only programs and ask ourselves, is it making a difference? If it's not, then maybe this is the time when we start looking back at our needs assessment again. What is showing up or percolating up that we need to focus our limited resources on? And obviously the logic model is a great tool to be, you know, visually looking at one item and then knowing, hey, you know, this maybe is not working out the way we want to. Is that something that strategically we should be either eliminating? Maybe we need to ratchet up the need, maybe doesn't match with the strategy, so we need to reevaluate that. So there's a lot of different ways to be able to use your logic model as more of a leadership tool for your team rather than just it's a tool that you do and you don't look at it again. And so here is what we developed, and remember, we're kind of still working on our stuff here, but we present this to our board of directors and then to our leadership team and then to some of the staff that work on these items. And so we have our strategic planning items identified in this as well. So if it's a strategic planning item, the board can see it all in this. And then we just use a very simple red is bad, yellow is a yield, we got to pay attention, and green is all good. And then we do provide, and red isn't so bad in the goal area because we're wanting to make sure that our progress is showing up. So in the first area where we have our MPI identified, this is a community project, and it's for early Head Start child care partnerships. We did apply for that. We did not get funded last year, and so we will be applying again. And so, you know, that's why it's in green, because we hope by 2021 we will actually obtain another Early Head Start Child Care Partnership grant. So this is just one way to be able to communicate with your board, in this case the Head Start staff, so they know why we're doing some of the things that we're doing. And then hopefully down the road we can develop this into more of a, at the end of the year, more of an infographic type impact report so that they can see what difference we are making and not worry so much about service counts.
I think it's really interesting that you've got, if you've got 122%, that you identified why you overachieved. I think sometimes we forget that we have to explain why we've done better than we targeted, as well as why we've not done as well. So just a quick summary here. What can anyone else in the network do? And I think you've talked a lot about things that that you were already doing when you started, and how you built the logic models at the program level, the local theory of change at the agency-wide level, how that all helped to work with a more productive strategic plan, and then how you're tracking it using a scorecard. I know scorecards are becoming more the norm in the network that we're looking at. How do we actually monitor our success? And you've set us a high bar there with showing how all of those things can connect together. So this is just some things to think about how the agency's already doing ROMA. We don't have to necessarily, we're not starting from scratch to do this work. And so we want to make sure that we acknowledge all of the things that we're already doing. Deb, do you have any summary observations or comments that you would like to make?
Well, I have one item, and I think when we talk about the ROMA cycle, we have to make it real for us every day. And I think people do the ROMA cycle every day. If they are going to the grocery store, they assess their pantry or what food they have in their refrigerator. They make a list, so they're planning. Then they go to the grocery store or they buy it online, and then their family often is assessing whether or not those items they purchased were the right items or the right brands in some cases. And so you, as the person that's buying the groceries, are evaluating what your family thinks, and then you're making changes. So my point about the ROMA cycle is really we do this every day in our personal lives and a variety of things. This is not, we're often making it more difficult than it needs to be. Just think about what you do and make it your own so that it makes sense to you.
It's so important to make it meaningful, and I think your example does just that. It helps people to understand, you catch them doing ROMA and say it's not some mysterious process, but it's part of the way you logically think, and as you say, the way you do your own personal business as well as your agency business. I thank you so much, Deb, for sharing your story, and you've gone the extra step to provide us with a lot of additional resources. Courtney, can you tell us about those resources?
Sure. Thank you both for presenting about this local agency story. We appreciate it. And we do have some additional resources that will help guide you through the information that was presented today. So what we've done is we have compiled the different examples and basically the Economic Security Corporation story into this packet of case study materials. And so this is available for you to get a better view of the scorecards, the logic models, the agency visuals, so that you can get some ideas for your own agency or adapt them how you see fit. So we do have this accompanying resource posted on the partnership website under our ROMA Next Generation Resource Guide, as well as on Community Action Academy under the ROMA Next Generation Training Series. So this PowerPoint will also be available for download, as well as this recording. And so we encourage you to use these resources. Like I said at the beginning, this is a part of a full curriculum piece on implementing ROMA, so that I'll go into more details on how a local agency can work to implement ROMA more effectively. It covers items such as organizational culture, how to build a ROMA culture, and the ROMA audit process. So again, we thank Debbie Markman and Barbara Mooney today for presenting this example. We also have a couple other contacts for more information if you're wondering how to get started, or if you're in the process of this and want to just talk it through. Myself and Jarl Crocker are available from the Community Action Partnership. Of course, Debbie Markman that presented is a nationally certified ROMA trainer out of Economic Security Corporation. Then both Carrie Gibson and Barbara Mooney are with the Association of Nationally Certified ROMA Trainers. So thank you all again for listening into this video today, and best of luck to you as you work to implement ROMA.